I'm Vance Bastion here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's The Edge Season 10 Episode 50 interview. We'll be talking with Madeleine Nakamura and discussing her novels Cursebreaker and Angel Eye. So let's get to know our guest. Madeleine is an author and editor based in Los Angeles. Her debut adult queer fantasy novel Cursebreakers, published by Red Hen Press, received starred reviews from Kirkus Reviews and Independent Book Review, and won bronze in the Forward Indies. In her spare time, Madeleine enjoys tabletop RPGs, video games, cooking, and embroidery. The sequel to Cursebreakers, Angel Eye, is out now. We're going to talk about both of them. Angel Eye also got the Kirkus star. So, Madeleine,
Hey,
welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, writing is a long and lonely craft. Where did the passion in you come to start this journey?
Um, I have kind of a different story, I think, than most writers in terms of why I decided I wanted to be a writer. A lot of people say like, "Oh, I knew from when I was a little kid, like I was always, drafting novels in second grade or whatever." Which is not really the case for me. I had no idea I wanted to be a novelist until I was probably sophomore year of college, really.
Okay.
I could never have imagined basically putting in the work to do anything short form or long form rather when I was a kid because I had like no interests and ambitions basically. Like I was very depressed basically like my whole childhood and didn't conceive of the idea that like I'm gonna need a career, like I'm gonna need to find something that I'm good at and like do it. And then I had this moment in college where I was like, okay, I'll be a computer science major. Everybody's saying, oh, you can be a computer science major and like you're set, which now, of course, seems ridiculous, but at the time was what everybody was being told. And so I sat down for like my first math class in college and was like, oh shit, like, wait a second. Actually, this is not viable. I actually do need to like figure out something that I enjoy and am good at and am planning to do in the future. I was always good in English class. Like, I guess I should try to be a writer because it was kind of the only skill that I had any confidence in that I knew that I had. And then, sort of after that, by coincidence, only after deciding to be a writer did I actually get the inspiration because before that, it was like, fine, I guess I'll do that. I have to do something. And then, completely by coincidence, I just read a couple of books that really finally inspired me and realized that there was writing out there that was something similar to what I actually wanted to do. So it was a very like backwards, I think.
Nice though. Way to get there. So, Cursebreakers and Angel Eye, it didn't look like they were listed as a series, and I want to talk about them independently, but I just have a quick question. When you got done with Cursebreakers and were holding that book in your hands, did you realize there was more to the story and decide to write Angel Eye, or had you always planned on multiple books?
So actually the third book in the series was drafted completely before the publication of the first.
Interesting.
Yeah, I I wrote them all relatively quickly and then spent like many years, well, not many, but like some years trying to find publication.
Okay. So if I were to see you at like a Pride event or a book event and they were on the table in front of you and I looked at those gorgeous covers and I was like, what is this series about? What would you tell me?
I would say it's a sort of gas lampy setting, kind of like Venetian, Victorian, Greco-Roman flavor setting, queer fantasy about a 41-year-old professor who has bipolar disorder and the various terrible situations that he encounters.
All right. So can we talk about the situation in Curse Breakers?
Yeah, so the setup for Curse Breakers is essentially that um, there's a conspiracy happening between sort of the like terrible iron-fisted military that's involved in this nation and a group of very unscrupulous academic magicians who are also teaching at the university that the main character teaches at.
Okay.
Um, Essentially, like trying to find a way to give their soldiers magic and experimenting on them, in search of power. And it's slowly revealed that the process really doesn't work. And the main character ends up having to deal with the coup that ensues basically.
What's your main character's name?
Adrian DeForno.
Love it. Perfect. So obviously he has to deal with it in some fashion because Angel Eye came out, and what's the problem there?
So Angel Eye opens with him sort of like recovering from the experiences of the first book, hospitalized, and uh, because of that vulnerability of his disability, he becomes like endangered by a medical serial killer that is starting to increase their kill count, basically ramping up their like I don't know murders essentially. And he has to find a way to like expose this person and avoid being like entrapped.
Wow. Okay, that sounds deep. But I love that you phrased it that way because it ties into the topics, and so we can use your books as examples of how you've attacked some of these different concepts. So the rise of queer fantasy. Obviously, you saw that there was either a need or it was growing and you wanted to be part of it. Tell us a bit more about why it matters and what makes queer spec fic so exciting.
Um, I'm never totally sure how to talk about this because on one hand, like I know a lot of the discussion around like why is queer fantasy important usually tends to take this avenue of like there's something inherently queer about speculative fiction. Like a lot of people will phrase it that way, saying like, there's these themes of otherness and, weirdness and alienation that queer people naturally latch onto, which I think of course is true. But at the same time, like I always hesitate to advocate for that too much because I think inherently like the reason that that appeal exists is because of like bigotry, basically, right? Like in a perfect world, there wouldn't necessarily be a queer fantasy genre. There would be queer any other kind of genre that you could think of, right? Like I think that in a perfect world, fantasy with queer characters in it would be able to be shelved as diversely as any other type of literature. And the reason that it's just queer fantasy, queer speculative fiction is kind of an artifact of like uh queer phobia in society. But like with that said, like there's no getting around the fact that if you are going to write a book with a queer character, it is inherently like an activist stance in some way, even though
Mhm.
it's kind of unfortunate. So like, I accept the reality of that. I guess it's kind of a meandering answer, but like I always get nervous to say like, oh, well, it's because like queer people inherently are this way or that way or have some connection to it. Because it's like a very delicate
It
nuance to strike.
it is, but so when people tell me that spec fic has this sort of natural queerness to it, I push back and I say what's actually important is that we see ourselves in the characters. Don't force me to look at somebody who might have blue skin and try to imagine myself as being other like that person. Especially if they're in, a straight relationship. They just happen to have blue skin and they're being ostracized for it. Well, that's not my experience.
Yeah.
So I push back on people who give you the argument you presented that they present to you because I'm like, no, I still want to see myself in a character.
Mhm.
So kudos to you for trying to walk that line. That's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's like thorny to discuss because if you accidentally sort of use the wrong words in expressing that, some like suddenly you're expressing an idea that you may not necessarily own. So
Right. Do you use like a beta reader sometimes to help you after you've put it down and are not sure if the wording is right?
I don't. I would love to have access to that, but at the moment I don't have anyone that I can like bounce thoughts off of in that way.
As your fan base grows, be available to asking on your favorite social platform, whichever one you use, hey, I need to write a character whose experience is XYZ. Does someone want to read something for me? Let me know how it sounds.
Oh, you mean like sensitivity readers?
Yeah,
Oh, yes. I think that I would seek that out if
perfect.
necessary.
So the other topic that centers around or that has come up in your character's life is mental illness. And you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about the representation and specifically the how it's stigmatized and not necessarily compassionately portrayed. Was there a direction you wanted to take this conversation before I go too much farther?
Um, Yeah, I think that the way that I would introduce it would be to say that a lot of times in fiction, like not just literature, not just fantasy specifically, but like ever, uh, fiction is usually not about someone who is severely mentally ill. Like usually if a character is severely mentally ill, that's because there's something that happens to the protagonist, either like best case scenario, they have to mourn or care for the person who is disabled in this way. But a lot of the time, they're being chased around in the woods by someone with an axe, and that's the representation of these illnesses.
Mhm.
So just sort of like having a story that's from the perspective of somebody who has an illness that involves like sometimes psychosis or like a very severe loss of insight or control. In the case of my books, it's bipolar type 1. And having the narrative like not only be from their perspective, but like treat their subjectivity seriously
Mhm.
and not treat them as like a device that's in place to assist the protagonist who is, normal, right?
Right.
Is unfortunately not that common. So that's sort of the way that I conceptualize like my books in conversation with like general ableism.
So when you write this, when you write your character, especially, using like the bipolar model, how do you present that to readers in such a way that it's natural in the character's life and not something you have to stop and explain?
Um, I think that it wasn't intentional, but my choice of protagonist makes that kind of easy because he's a very self-reflective guy,
Okay.
maybe a little bit like overly so. He's always kind of thinking about himself, and he is very mired in like guilt and self-worth issues. So he is constantly thinking about like his situation and like the way that he appears to other people. And so that makes it easy to have his like internal narration kind of guide you along to the information about that.
Mhm.
I guess more prosaically, the book does also open with him like being on his way to see his doctor. So like that's an easy opportunity to just get the information there. I
Do
did
you,
notice, oh, sorry, I interrupted.
I won't forget my question.
Uh, um, I did notice oddly, like a lot of the terminology that is involved in describing his bipolar disorder is like, like fantasy ass stuff, right? Because like I chose different words. And I was shocked at how many readers did not catch the sort of direct one-to-one line and
Huh.
thought that because a different word is being used, I was trying to like suggest that he's like demonically possessed or that it's a magical version of borderline, like really odd conclusions like that. But
Hmm.
I guess that's the risk that you run when you write any kind of fantasy.
Right. Do you share his perceptions? I know they always say show, don't tell. Do you share his perceptions with the reader so they can experience it? Or is it more of a him talking to someone else about it in dialogue?
It's an even mixture.
Okay. All right. All right. Baz, I know you're a perception king. Did you have any questions?
He says that because that's my focus in writing is about perceptions. The whole thing I think that I find very interesting is that we talk a lot about the horror genre being very queer delineated or defined because of the otherness in horror. But it's very synonymous with and equal to the fantasy genre, I think, because again, those often focus on someone being other. And do you find it's, as a writer, do you find it's easier for you to delve into character depth because of the otherness of these characters, or do you find that more of a challenge in trying to express what they're struggling against?
Um, I definitely don't think it makes it more difficult. I think that compared to a lot of fantasy, my books are not necessarily like the most fantastical.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's a little bit closer to low fantasy than high fantasy. There's not like a lot of elves and dragons, right? So in that way, the character's sort of basic situation is not necessarily that like unknowable in comparison to what it could be. Um, I will say the advantage of fantasy though is that you don't have to necessarily worry about a lot of like real world constraints or different things. Like if I decide that I don't really care how these characters do their taxes, I don't need to think about it in the same way as I might if it were supposed to be in like a direct one-to-one parallel to the real world.
I see. Great. Okay. Well, like I agree with Vance. Kudos to you for putting this down this way because I think an exploration of dealing with these topics in a fantasy realm, even if it's not super fantastical, um, is still a unique way to approach it. And I think it helps desensitize it or destigmatize it because you're able to see it from a view that typically isn't presented. So it kind of disarms someone who might not be as open to reading stories that have this kind of perspective. But because it has that realm that it's operating in, it kind of makes it more accessible, don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that is part of what makes it, something that I enjoy doing. But at the same time, I think it's also kind of a double-edged sword a little bit
Mm,
because part of me does sometimes hesitate and think to myself, like, all right, well, if this reader was not going to take this story seriously because it's about somebody who has this disorder,
good
um,
point.
how do I feel about the idea that I'm making it more palatable for them?
Mm,
Um, so I think ultimately the balance for me is that like I do consider that to be a good thing because that's what art is for. Like sometimes you're just gonna have to accept that like that gateway is preferable to it not being there. But sometimes I do have this flash of resentment, like, oh my God, okay, well if it took wizards for you to take this seriously, like I think a little bit less of you. But that's art, I guess.
yeah, and yeah, I think one of the things that we as authors struggle with is that you often have the whole don't paint my community with this big wide brush, but at the same time, they try to chide you because, oh, well, we don't do that. Well, excuse me. I mean, you cannot, the argument boils down to, well, I may be of this community, but we're not a monolith, and my journey may have very little in common with the mainstream of that community, but it doesn't mean I'm not still a part of it. So, you have this fine line, and I think readers sometimes get caught up in um, the proper representation rather than understanding that some characters, an individual character, who could be, of a certain race or of a certain background, a certain skin color, whatever, that others them in many respects, they could have a very different journey than those that are like them. And I think that a lot of readers don't give the author permission to explore those experiences in characters who may go against the grain of a lot of people in their community, but they still deserve to be represented, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent way to phrase it. I think a lot of people lose the forest for the trees
Yeah,
and are very, as you said, like storytelling, the the individual things that are being portrayed. Yeah.
yeah. It just seems like we're caught between a rock and a hard place often as authors because you know what the character is dealing with and what they're grappling with. And the thing that goes unwritten often is that their journey hasn't been the same as so and so who's also from the same community. And so, how do you express that in a way that doesn't seem like you're trying to take literary license to off-road them somewhere in some way that nobody expects, but that is justified because of their experiences that have led them to where they currently are? And I think that you can get caught up in backstory of trying to explain that kind of stuff. So it is a balance that we have to strike. And I think at some point, as an author, you just have to say, well, this is who it is. This is who they
Mhm.
are. and you either like it or you don't, and that's okay. That's part of the game of what we're all playing here. But I think when people become activists against writers who have tried to express a character-driven story, and that character has justification for feeling or acting the way that they do, that I think that readers need to understand that what they perceive, again, here's where perceptions apart, what they perceive to be a certain community's aspect or way that they are seen visually or and digested by the mainstream society, that your characters can be very, very different, but still be part of that same community. And I think that that's the struggle between author and audience, is whether or not the work has sufficiently supplied that to a reader to go, oh, okay, they may be Black, but that has not been their full experience to have gone through X, Y, and Z. They had a very different, kind of environment that leads them to think in ways that maybe the mainstream of that community doesn't think. So I think it is a delicate balance. So, it's something that I think as authors we tend to want to really grapple with, because it's good, juicy stuff to write from. But at the same time, you have to be prepared for those who will try to use it against you if you don't do it the way they think that it should be done. And my comment to all of that is always, well, then you go write it. Go write that story, kind of thing. But I think they should all be represented.
Yeah, I think it just depends. Like the reason that all of these conversations get very tangled up, I think, is that people forget that these characters are not real and these situations are not real.
Mm,
They're all decisions that are being made by someone. And so I think that that's both ways, like many things. Like a lot of the time, if there's a lot of uh, pushback and people are saying, I don't think that this is authentic, I think that maybe you should have taken a little bit longer to like consider this. That's often valid, but at the same time, like often not.
yeah.
Sometimes not. And I'm always very hesitant to say that because it makes me sound like some blue collar
Yeah,
comedian
that's
on
the
tour.
struggle
Like
right there. That's the struggle right there.
it's very difficult not to talk about this without sounding like you're an idiot saying, and PC culture, you can't say anything these days. That's really not, I think, what anybody responsible is saying. It is just true, however, that like sometimes people become very fixated on a single aspect of something and maybe don't have as much grace for the idea that other people's
Yeah,
experiences differ from
yeah.
theirs.
So, I mean, following up on where this is going, you, Madeline, came to writing very intentionally. Like, you didn't just grow up with ideas in your head that you kept putting down in journals. You very intentionally decided, I'm going to do this. Did you have any anxiety about what people would say before your books were published? Like, did that color anything you did?
Yes, I was very anxious. I was terribly anxious, and unfortunately, that has been validated. Uh,
Oh,
I would say like 95% of responses have been just like wonderful and lovely and like very encouraging. But I mean, yeah, I've gotten some like nasty emails for sure. I was nervous the whole time because my experience in college as a creative writing major was going to a lot of writing workshops. And the college that I went to had a lot of um, okay, I don't know if there is a way to phrase this gracefully, so I will just sort of do my best. A lot of very anxious young white people who were scared all the time that someone
Mm,
was going to tell them that they were racist. And so their fear of that made them preemptively lash out at people that they thought were safer targets.
oh,
And they were sort of hyper vigilant with this idea that, like, at any moment, someone was going to tell them that they were doing something wrong and their whole life would fall apart. Because I think that there is an inherent, like, naivete to some people at this stage in their life, usually like young white people, where kind of buy into the idea of this vicious cancel culture that's going to ruin their life. And they believe that that threat is so real that it makes them kind of like a little bit rabid in their pursuit of like defending themselves from it. And so you had this sort of like Shark Tank atmosphere where everybody was very keen to latch on to something that they could accuse someone else of to protect themselves. And so, for instance, it would be like, I see that someone has written a story that has an interracial couple in it. Uh, I, as a white student, am going to tell authors of color in the class that, you know, I have a problem with this and I have a problem with that, or like, obviously it's like very difficult to phrase precisely, but sort of that atmosphere of like panopticon paranoia where everybody's trying to strike preemptively. It's really not great for like creative development. And so people would just sort of make things up. Like uh I had submitted a chapter of Cursebreakers, and I was told, I think your character is really problematic and kind of abusive. Because at one point he's like kind of crying and like, you know, having a really difficult time. And he grabs someone's sleeve to like pull them closer, begging them, like, no, like, stay with me, please. A close friend of his who is like taking care of him. And this like atmosphere of just like, we need to find something to criticize people for. Had students saying, I really think that you've done a terrible job here and you've written something like really problematic, like your character is like an abuser. And I found it very uncomfortable to read and stuff like that because he grabs this guy's sleeve. So in the published version of the book, I changed it so that he lets him go before the next part of the scene progresses because that was so in my head of like, okay, people are thinking of this character as like dangerous and violent. And was that probably because of the way that he's disabled a little bit? Yeah, I mean, probably that was a factor. But just like these little instances would pile up and pile up. Where I became convinced that like everyone in the world was going to see me as a monster because of things that they were reading into this book. And that was not the case at all. But yeah, I mean, I did discover that a lot of people read in that way of
And
trying to
I
like,
think context plays a heavy part in it though, because the person could have been grabbing his sleeve in desperation to please understand, you know, I'm frustrated, I'm struggling here. And so I think that sometimes these people who have these comments, you kind of have to push back and say, okay, why do you think that's where that's coming from? And then let me explain to you where my intent was as I wrote it. And I think the thing that we need to really press back as authors is we need to have permission to write people who may not be likable. They may not be what you perceive them to be. They may also be presenting themselves in a way that is a wall, a protection wall that they're putting up. That's not really who they are, but they feel they have to present. You know, again, it's this whole perception thing. This is why I use it and why I write about it, because people have these constant need, especially in today's society with social media, which I think has been the bane of all of our existence. And I get the ironic statement in that because I'm putting this up on YouTube. But, um, you know, the whole idea that we have to monitor ourselves and guard ourselves. I've never been of that position. Words have power, yes, but only the power the audience member gives it. So you have to kind of accept that you're going to have people who are problematic about this kind of stuff, and you're going to have to contend with that. But just as the author, as the creator, you kind of have to hold firm and just say, you know, this is the story. It may not be a story you like. It may be a story that is triggering for you. That's a you thing. You need to figure that out. But my story is what it is. And I'm not saying that as authors we can't learn and continue to grow. I think we should. You should take those notes and figure out what maybe you've missed in writing it in a way that might have addressed that situation. So as your craft, you can use that kind of feedback. But at the same time, I think we need to take the sting out of it because sometimes we have to write characters that don't necessarily meet all the criteria of a digestible character for every reader that's out there. It's just not going to happen. You're going to find people are going to find problems with every single character presented. So at some point, you just have to say, it is what it is, guys. If you don't like that, that's fine. That's a you thing. You can do that. And I have no gripes against it. But, if you really feel that strongly, hey, maybe you should write the story. Maybe you should write a story like this and tell it from your perspective, kind of thing. I
Yeah.
mean, I just think we have to give ourselves more permission to hold firm. And that's what I'm trying to say. In that, if that's the way the story goes, that's the way the story goes.
Yeah. I definitely think like my agony over my first manuscript was very much the product of like being an inexperienced writer and being very young. And I think that it is a stage of the creative process that like eases as you become more experienced. And it's just yeah, it's difficult when you're going through the process of like forming what you believe about yourself as a person, like at that age, like what is my framework for the world? What do I care about? What are my priorities? That stage of personal development is like very vulnerable to mm, messing up your creative development because you're not sure of yourself and you uh
Sure,
compromise and then
absolutely.
resent it and it makes you weird. So yeah.
So since that writing class, when that first event happened with the your character grabbing his friend's arm, have you developed like tools for facing that anxiety and freeing up your creativity so your work can be authentically yours?
Oh yeah, just like stop thinking about it. Not in the way of like stop thinking about how to be responsible or like stop thinking about how people are going to perceive your work because obviously like any writer, you need to be very much thinking about how your writing is going to be perceived. That's not the same thing as being worried about how your writing is going to be perceived by people on Instagram. Like those are two different things.
Right.
So just accepting it, like I found it useful just like try to stop getting so mad about the hypothetical idea of somebody criticizing me. Like that's their right, that's prerogative. Sometimes they're going to be correct. Like sometimes I will receive criticisms that are completely justified and on point, and I just have to like you just have to
That's part of learning your craft. It's
chill. Yeah.
yeah, it's part of honing your craft. And it's like Vance often says, it's better to get a strong response than a because you can't do anything with. But if you have a strong response either way, either really positive or someone who has a real axe to grind about it, there is something in your craft that maybe you're not addressing. And I think that's the way to make lemonade out of those lemons because you have a means of taking something that might have a bit of a sting in the way that it was presented. But when you break it down and distill it, you kind of go, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I could have written it this way and it might have addressed those things. So again, that's a craft thing you can pull out of that kind of a situation, don't you think?
I do. Yeah. I do. Actually, sort of in that vein, one of the most common things that people say, they don't seem to have like very much is this book was so disturbing and it had a lot of it like it's too dark, it's too disturbing, it's disgusting. Like, why would you write about this? Which really surprises me because if I can be honest, I don't think it's that bold of a story.
Are they just
I
responding to the parts where the military is experimenting on their soldiers? I mean,
there's some violence, there's some like abuse, there's
but
scenes of like suffering, but I really don't think that it's that intense of a novel. There's not a lot of like graphic stuff. Like I wish I had been more like I wish I'd gone harder, right? Like after publication, I started to kind of feel like, you know what, I was a little bit safe with this. I edited myself in ways that were kind of cowardly. Like I wish that I had been sharper with this book. And what made me realize that was reading responses from people who were like, wow, this book like really sent me into a spiral because of how dark it is, and thinking to myself, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
The title
what could
is
you be talking about?
the title is
They were at a picnic and it
Cursebreakers.
rained. That's not rocket science, you know. I just like again giving ourselves permission to write what it is we need to write. And I think that people get too caught up, especially, and I think of this whole social justice stuff. And I'm not knocking that there is a time and a place for that kind of thing. But what I'm trying to say is when you're a craftsman of art, art is meant to be provocative. It is meant to make you feel something. It is meant to make you think about things that may not be comfortable. And I think we have to write characters, if as writers, you know, that we have to be able to write those characters. Yeah, and if we don't, then you can also have the same scenario where you have like authors who have been canceled because of something personally in their life that may be horrible. But in those situations, I always have in the back of my mind, yeah, because being native, I have a story called The Education of Little Tree, which was written by a known KKK Grand Dragon. And so you have someone who wrote an incredibly sensitive, beautifully crafted story about an Indian boy at a boarding school during the time when boarding schools were horrendous to those children. And he wrote a very sensitive book on the subject. And you think, okay, but this guy's a known racist, you know, and yet he had the wherewithal to write this story about a young native boy stuck in the boarding school system. And I think that if we don't give people permission to play in those arenas, how are they expected to grow not only as an artist, but as a person? You know, I think we have to give ourselves that kind of permission, both as audience and as the writers of it. Don't you think?
I do, yeah. I always get nervous to talk about what exactly it is that I think about this whole discourse, because I like to be able to write it down to make sure that I'm like
Mm,
speaking as precisely as possible, because
hmm
I do have like very specific opinions on it. But yeah, no, I think generally uh it's a very individual thing. Yeah.
hmm
So, was there anything about Cursebreakers or Angel Eye that you want readers to know that we didn't think to ask?
I want readers to know. I would say that the second book has a romance, and the main character is gay, so it's a queer romance. But what I've noticed a lot of people saying about the first book is I was so relieved to find queer fantasy that isn't necessarily romance centric, because I think that is actually kind of like an underserved niche, and I would like readers to know that. While there is a romance, most of it is still about serial killing. So don't be
Right.
put
Don't get it
off.
twisted.
Yeah, don't get it twisted.
Perfect. All right. Well, are you ready for our get to know you questions?
Mhm.
Take it away, Baz.
All right. If you're enjoying everything that we're doing here, please like and subscribe and comment and do all of the things that are required of social media. And if you want to support us to continue doing things like this and having these great discussions with creative writers and authors and playwrights and so forth, please consider supporting us either at patreon.com/rope podcast or buymecoffee.com/rope podcast, or even on our YouTube channel. You can join our YouTube memberships, and it's only 99 cents a month. So for less than a buck, you can help us out, keep this going, because there are costs involved in what we're doing. Anyways, with all of that aside, can you name a movie that was better than the book?
Um, I think that film and prose are such different mediums that it would feel like apples to oranges. Like I couldn't exactly make that claim, except in the case of like books that were so bad that a movie almost couldn't help but be better. And I can name some of those, but I won't on a
Okay,
public video.
fair enough, fair enough. Okay, well, which fictional character would you most like to be friends with?
Um, I did think about this one. I actually don't know that I have an answer, because the characters that are most memorable to me would make really terrible friends. Like I think that if you can readily think of a character that is like iconic to you, like you would not want to be their friend, right?
I guess,
Nope.
yeah. All right. Well, mine is Auntie Beam. So if you bring her along, you're going to have a good time no matter what happens. So that's the one I would choose. Okay. Well, what's the most fascinating fact that you know?
Mm, Most fascinating is difficult to quantify, but one of my favorite, like, weird, kind of ironic historical facts is that there was a Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis who, like, basically figured out a crucial component of germ theory really early. He figured out that, like, people in this clinic in Vienna, the women that were giving birth were dying at such terrible rates because the other doctors weren't washing their hands after they would do autopsies. So he, like, implemented this program of, like, just wash your hands, and the maternal death rate plummeted. But none of his colleagues believed him when he started, like, publishing papers about why you need to wash your hands. They basically he was thrown in an asylum because he became, like, so distressed that no one was taking him seriously. He was beaten by the guards and died, like, in ignominy. And it was
Wow.
only later that, like, Louis Pasteur, like, popularized germ theory.
Wow.
That's dark.
Yeah.
It's dark, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
And he
what's your
saved a lot of women, so
well, no, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah. Wow, I'm glad you said who he was. So that way we have it down now that give him credit. All right. So what was your favorite subject in school?
it was philosophy,
Hmm.
not English. I took as many philosophy courses as I could.
Interesting. Okay. Well, before making a telephone call, do you rehearse what you're going to say?
I do in broad strokes, like, not down to the word, but yeah, I try to have it in my head.
Okay. What current event or causes are you most passionate about?
I would say where I live, California, USA, very concerned about immigration rights violations, very concerned about our communities being raided by,
The yeah, the Gestapo of the US. Yeah.
yeah, that's very present in my mind.
Yeah.
Globally, obviously, climate change is going to be very present in people's minds as well. There's so much to be thinking about. But yeah, Palestine, Sudan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry, people. You can have an asshole, just choose not to be one. I'll just be a good person. That's how simple it really is. Be good to people and, hopefully it'll catch on. I just don't get all this harm in the world. It's just be nice. There's nothing wrong with being nice, okay? Okay, if you could visit anywhere in the world, where would that be?
Uh, I would have to say Canada because well, not all of, a lot of my friends live in Canada, and I'm never, like, practically gonna see them. I would choose to go hang out with some of my friends that are in
Wow.
Oh, that's
Alberta
lovely.
or British Columbia. Yeah.
That's lovely. I love our Canadian friends. All right. Well, who, if anyone, was your first celebrity crush?
I don't think I have an example of a live action celebrity crush, but I was in love with Shigo from Kim Possible as an elementary schooler, so I don't know if that counts.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, sure, absolutely. All right. And final question: what's your personal favorite recipe that you make, and you're willing to share it with us?
Wine braised short ribs. And
Ooh.
I don't know, do I give, like, the link to the site that you can, like, put in the video, or should I just, like, describe it?
You
You
can
can just
just
try.
describe it and like
Yeah.
just give credit, like if it was Total Wine or whatever.
Okay, let me find the credit for this recipe. Sorry, cut out some silence here while I find that. It is from triedandtruerecipe.com, wine braised beef short ribs. And basically, you dump, like, a whole bottle of wine and some other stuff in with, like, 4 pounds of short ribs and just cook it for a really long time. And I like to also saute some mushrooms to put into the sauce before it's finished.
Yum.
Lovely, lovely. Love that. Well, you made it through our list. Bravo.
Nicely done. So, I usually at this point ask what's coming up next, but you've already teased a book three. Are you telling people about it yet, or is it still under secret project perhaps?
I'm not telling people about it yet because it needs to be rewritten almost completely. I wrote it about a pandemic before COVID.
Oof.
Uh, yeah, oof. And so it needs to be basically turned inside out because now I can't stand it at all. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to like get it into workable shape and publish it as the third of a trilogy, but it's going slowly, so we'll see.
All right. Well, do you have any other events or appearances coming up? I know it's the holiday season and they tend to drop off at this point, but anything you want people to know where they can see you and meet you?
Um, Not currently.
That's fair.
Not much on the schedule.
All right. And folks can find you at madeleinenakamura.com and Instagram under the same name, correct?
Hmm.
Any other sites that you use that you want people to know about?
No, I should have more social media, but I don't.
No, no, you don't. No, you don't.
The, the
You're good. You're good.
honestly, the most success I've seen are the people who pick the one that resonates with them the most and just use that one.
Yeah,
Honestly, those are the best successes I've seen.
yeah. You spread yourself too thin, and then you've got all kinds of crap coming at you that you really don't need to be bothered
Right.
with. Trust me, Vance and I have kind of pulled back from all our social media, and we've never been happier.
Right. Well, Madeline, do you have any final words of wisdom for folks?
Hmm. Oh my God. Trying
So
so
wait,
hard
you
to
want me
think
to
of
be smart
something.
too?
I have to be wise now.
Uh, I really would like to think of something. I'm sorry, sidebar to like give me a second to think. Um, yes, my word of wisdom for other authors would be don't neglect reading history books, especially if you are a fantasy writer. Reading history books will take you a long way.
Mhm.
Bravo. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Madeleine Nakamura for joining us. Madeline, thank you so much, and thank you for your flexibility in changing our recording date.
Thank you guys as well. This was really great.
It was a lot of fun. All right, folks, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Our show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our links to our socials, our website, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye bye now.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.